Welcome to Tell It Like It Is. I'm Gary Polland. This show is a fresh look at politics and public affairs. Here we give you the real deal, not bias or spin, or the major media's politically correct opinion. Masquerading as facts. When we provide you opinions, you will know it. This show rejects doctrinal uniformity. This political disease is a terminal threat for our democracy. The anti-American mobs out there are not appeasable, and they are not going away. You may not be interested in them, but they are interested in you. And their target is our country and our democracy. Now for today's show. Our first guest is Neil Nobel. Neil Nobel is an economist, former stockbroker, but an economist who has studied the economy his entire life. There's probably few people I know in America that knows as much about what's really going on in our economy, and he tells it like it is. Neil, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Gary. It's nice to be with you.
So, Neil, let's talk about the state of our stock market. You know, the stock market seems to be going up. We've recovered most of the losses on its face that was sustained at the decline that took place early in the year when COVID was first revealed to the American people as the greatest pandemic in the history of the world. So where are we today?
Well, let's just rewind the tape a little bit. Go back to the December of 2018, where the Federal Reserve was attempting to return to normality by raising interest rates. And you might remember that big break in the market that occurred then. The Fed pivoted, moved away from normalizing interest rates. The market took off and was surging into this year when it got hit with the COVID lockdown. It wasn't so much the COVID itself, it was the lockdown, which simultaneously stopped people from going to work, producing, and stopped people from going to the store, consuming. And this caused a very sharp slowdown in the economy and a very sharp drop in all the equity markets, followed by an enormous effort on the part of the Federal Reserve and fiscal policy to stimulate during this crisis, and the market popped back up. We just completed the quarter. It was a very good quarter. The NASDAQ, the QQQ, the largest stocks, technology stocks, continue to be the leader. But while the quarter was a great rebound, if you look year to date, it's not so good. Only the NASDAQ has substantial gains. The S&P, the broader market, actually is negative about 1.42%, and the smaller cap stocks, the Russell 2000, is actually negative. So despite the huge rally we've had, it's been a narrow rally, and that's even been concentrated further. The big five, some people call them the FANG stocks, your Googles, Microsoft, Apple, et cetera, really have been leading the market.
Okay, I think we have a chart on corporate equities versus profits that you found interesting. Why is this chart significant?
Well, this just shows the departure. Some people would call it a departure from reality. Earnings were flattening and have dropped sharply, and stocks have soared. So where's the connection between economic growth, earnings, and the stock market? Well, it doesn't seem to be connected right now. It's been disconnected to an historic degree. I don't think that's particularly healthy. There's two things that could be causing it. One is the stock market is looking over the horizon. It's basically saying this COVID thing is short term. Earnings are going to return to normal and the economy is going to grow. Therefore, we're going to overlook this valley and look at the other side. Or it could be the enormous effort on the part of the Federal Reserve have disconnected the market from reality. Either way, it's an historic disconnect.
Okay, and when we talk about what the Federal Reserve is up to, is that tied to the rapid increase in the money supply?
It is. The Federal Reserve, you might remember during the crisis of 2008, did a lot of things called quantitative easing, which basically increased bank reserves. But to a large extent, those bank reserves remained within the banks and didn't get out into the public. This time, a combination of buying assets directly, such as what they're doing with corporate bonds, and the fiscal policy, handing out all these CARES checks, has caused a money supply to grow about 18% in the month of May and a whopping 24% in the month of June. So money supply is now growing rapidly, and historically, if you grow the money supply faster than you do the real supply of goods and services, you're going to create inflation.
You know, there's talk now, Neil, in Arizona and Texas and other states to shut down again and have people just stay at home again. I think we're in week 18 of what I call the quarantine. That would seem to me be a death knell for the economy in those states. Am I missing something?
It's a real risk to the stock market going forward. As I said, it's trying to look over this dip, and I don't know if it's prepared for another dip to deal with.
That could really do a number for that. And of course, most of the people who watch this show are interested in their jobs, in their clientele, the people or their customers, to make sure they have money, that they can come out and spend it, and businesses can survive. I mean, we have suffered the destruction of hundreds of thousands of small businesses in this country. How do we survive that?
Our system is not built to be shut down like this, and this is the first pandemic when we've done that. We had a severe pandemic in 1968, and we didn't do anything like this. It's amazing to me. I'm not an epidemiologist, but it seems like some of the public decisions that have been made have not been balanced. There's been a concentration on saving the medical system from strain, and not enough attention given to the economy, because at the end of the day, how do you support all the people that are ill, and how do you support all the people that are thrown out of work if you don't have a vibrant economy?
Well, and the short answer is the printing press. And so, which brings us to our next chart, Neil, which is the Manhattan Institute's look at the current budget deficit. Tell us what we're looking at here.
Well, the budget deficit has been rising in the United States for a number of years. Some of it's structural. As you know, a lot of the budget, almost 3/4 of it, is transfer payments, which is age-related. So as the baby boom washes upon the shores of the economy, it's going to drive up spending tremendously. But we've also had now the COVID expenses and these emergency measures to add to it. And we were projecting something on the magnitude of a $3 trillion deficit for 2020. I think it could be closer to 4. A lot depends on the severity of the second dip and whether we get another lockdown, and whether the economy recovers and produces the revenue flowing into the government coffers, because without revenue, the deficit's going to be worse. So, and there's a final thing, and that is, I don't see any real political force opposing deficit spending today. Republicans, which used to be the keepers of fiscal sanity, have grown silent on this, and the Democrats are proposing Green New Deals and all kinds of universal basic income and all kinds of spending programs with no thought as to where the revenue is coming from. So, Gary, right now, no one seems to care about the deficit, and that is frightening, because you cannot borrow beyond the capacity of an individual or a corporation or a government to service that unless you print the difference.
Okay, let's talk about that. If we print the difference, what is the impact on average American when we print the difference to cover this deficit?
Historically, it results in generally asset bubbles. People say we really haven't had inflation, but you could say the inflation has taken place in the stock and bond markets. And incidentally, we were looking at the performance of the various investments just a few minutes ago. Although we had a nice recovery in the stock market, it's essentially flat through the second quarter. Gold was up 18% year to date, and the gold stock average was up 31%, even beating the NASDAQ. So the market is beginning to signal there that price inflation is coming. And I don't think people really want that. You and I are old enough to remember what happened during the 1960s and 70s, and it's not pleasant. And where are the limitations on spending? You just don't see any.
There are none, Neil. And so for an average investor, you got a budget deficit down to exceed $4 trillion, which will be by far the highest budget deficit in the history of the country. And that's being conservative, because we're only just past mid-year. So if there's additional stimulus packages costing more trillions of dollars, we could have a budget deficit at $6 trillion. It's not going to get financed. It's going to get monetized, which means they're going to the printing press. They're going to create money. And in history, when you create more money with a limited amount of goods, which we have, obviously, that's the world, Then you have inflation. Inflation can be your cereal box is not nearly as big as it used to be. Inflation can be the cost of items you want to buy are going to be more expensive. You had talked earlier, Neil, about the comparison. What's happened to the dollar? What does $100 buy compared to 20 years ago or so and now?
Well, next month is August, and August of 1971 was a pivotal event in American history. That is the final cut from gold, which was made by President Nixon. And since then, we've had really no restraint. You can see that the chronic budget deficits began right around that era as we were funding the Vietnam War and the Great Society. And it created inflation throughout the last 30, 40 years. Today, it would take about $637 to buy what $100 bought in 1971. So inflation is particularly difficult for, let's call it, the lower economic classes. Those people who are wealthy enough and sophisticated enough to own assets, real estate, gold, silver, stocks, etc. They can do pretty well in inflation through speculation and investing. But people who don't have assets, their cost of living goes up. And their wages don't go up as fast as that cost of living, and they get squeezed, and they have a lower standard of living. So we are flirting with some dangerous stuff, and inflation's also, if they become severe enough,
I hear you, Neil.
We've
got to take a short break. We will be back after this break with Tell It Like It Is.
When it comes to protecting yourself and your partners, all the information out there can be overwhelming. Visit our website. We are a free and confidential service striving to help you stay informed and stay notified. We are committed to a healthy Houston.
Houston's only Cadillac to your door dealer, Ron Carter Cadillac, delivers test drives to your home or office. Drive the new 2020 Cadillac XT4, only $399 a month, or the new 2020 XT5, only $429 a month, both for 39 months lease with just $1 down. Or purchase the XT4 or XT5 and enjoy 0.9% APR for 72 months with no payments until November. RonCarterCadillac.com. Houston's only Cadillac to your door dealer, Ron Carter Cadillac, delivers test drives to your home or office. For a limited time, get $16,000 off all in-stock Cadillac 2019 XT5 crossovers and $19,000 off all in-stock 2019 CT6 sedans. Or experience the first ever 2020 Cadillac XT6 Premium Luxury Collection, only $519 with $1 down for 39 months lease. Or purchase and receive 0.9% APR for 72 months with no payments until November. RonCarterCadillac.com.
Welcome back to Tell It Like It Is with Gary Polland. My guest is Neil Nobel of Arizona. He's an economist and knowledgeable about all kinds of things in investing. A good resource for you, our viewers. So Neil, we're back. We were talking before the break about what do you do in an investment in this climate where we have inflation, significant inflation. In fact, let's talk about the meaning of $100 in 1971 now paid by $16 worth of goods. That's not a lot. $100 like this was really something in 1971. I actually thought it was still something now, but that's not much at all. Prices have really gone up significantly.
Inflation is a pernicious thing once it's let loose. It screws up one's accounting. It makes one's consume today because costs are going to go up in the future. It can actually, if it gets severe enough, can destabilize society. We've seen Latin American countries have their governments collapse due to wild inflation. In our own history, we had trouble with the Continental after the Revolutionary War, the greenback dollar after the Civil War. Inflation is a monster that you need to keep contained. And the classic example was after World War I and the reparations cost on Germany. Inflation got so bad in Germany, it crushed the middle class and led to the rise of dictatorship.
Yeah, Nazis.
So You're right, the Nazis, and
Well,
it's
let me ask you this question. When you talk about inflation, when Nixon in 1971 closed the gold window, that meant that you couldn't trade your paper dollars for gold. I mean, that's basically what it meant. It was important for other countries. We went off the gold standard. So what is the standard America is on today for our currency?
trust in politician standard.
Oh my God. That's, if you look at the statistics, Neil, the American people don't trust the politicians hardly at all. They're way down in trust. So
they have wriggled out of. They've wriggled out every.
Go ahead.
They have wriggled out of every constitutional and restraint that limited the production of money, if you want to call that, over a series of years. And we really are on the politician standard. If they behave themselves and act moderately, we might have a moderate inflation of 2 or 3% a year, which is livable, and one can deal with that. We have been dealing with that. But the deficits, as you showed earlier, are now of a magnitude where they're running 4 times what they were a previous year. The question is, how long can we do this and maintain social and economic stability? And we're playing a dangerous game here.
If you watch what happened over the last month or two, which you have and our viewers have, the answer is not very long. We've already had social instability, and that was related to the unfortunate death in Seattle, and then all the reactions, of course, some of which we believe are extremist promoted, but regardless, and it's just a big concern. So what if you're like the average American? The most distressing statistic I've heard over the last couple of months, Neil, is that the average American can't lay their hands on $500 if they need it. That's really scary to me. What do people need to do, regardless of their economic outlook, in order to try to be prepared for the future?
Well, as I was saying earlier, it's easier for those who are wealthier to deal with inflation because they can buy assets that appreciate. For those that don't have it, a good job, good training, saving money, the old verities that we used to live by are still valid and are going to be necessary.
Well, and the thing I think people forgot, regardless of how much you make, you can still save a percentage of your income. You may have a deal with your employer where they'll match the 401k to a number that they'll match on. So that's not taking advantage of that seems pretty foolish to me. I mean, you've got to put money away for a rainy day. Thinking that the government is always going to be there to bail you out, I think it's a dangerous concept, Neil.
I agree with you wholeheartedly.
So that's our advice. You can save whatever you want to save. Okay, going forward, Neil, what do we have to look forward to in the next 6 months? Of course, we have a presidential election coming. That's, is that a good thing or a bad thing? I don't know. The people I've talked to are really pretty disgusted. So let's say we have a Biden victory in November and the Democrats take control of the Senate and the House. What is the future of America's economy?
Well, you've got the independent element there of the Federal Reserve and how much money it shoves into the system. And we were talking about the disconnect between earnings and stock values, and I think that has a lot to do with it. It's called the TINA effect, T-I-N-A. There is no alternative. There's no return in bonds. There's no return in bank deposits. So a lot of this funny money that's created has been flowing into the stock market. So what does the election mean? It depends on the other factors. How bad is the COVID shutdown? What is the Federal Reserve doing? But I would say a Biden victory, because he's going to call for more spending, bigger deficits, more regulation, higher taxes, particularly capital gains taxes, I think is going to be a negative for the stock market. Negative for the economy also. And negative for the economy.
Okay, and the politics. Then the politics aside, the economy and the American people have really taken a lot, given all the stresses and strains that have been put on them by the political class in this country. And the economy continued to progress. I mean, we came out of the recession that ended sometime early in the Obama administration, and they did make progress, though government regulations got in the way. Trump gets elected, and sweeps away a lot of regulation in order to free the economy up to get rolling. And then we get hit smack in the face with COVID and what I call the overreaction of shutting it down for everybody as opposed to those who are at risk. And we end up with an economy in deep trouble and lots of folks just really hurting. And that's what they got from the politicians making decisions about how we should deal with diseases. They don't know what they're doing. That's the bottom line. So then we look at what's going to happen going forward, and you kind of wonder, Neil, what's the future?
Well, that's what makes this whole thing a mystery and an art. Look, there are certain areas that are really hurting. I mean, another lockdown is going to kill chances of airlines, cruise lines recovering. Restaurants are hurting. Employment in all those areas, which tend to be people of lower income, have really been hurt by all this. But eventually, end demand's going to hurt. And you cannot shut down both production and consumption simultaneously and expect a good economy. And I think it leaves the society more vulnerable to deal with its medical issues than otherwise. So I think there needs to be a better balance, and I certainly would agree with you in that regard.
Yeah, and in fact, one of the things we found was early on we're listening just to the doctors, and the doctors were not getting input from the economists like you that would advise that we can do certain things, but we don't want to go this far because of the damage we're going to do to the economy. And the economy, economic damages causes pain, heartache, spousal abuse, suicides, drug abuse, all these things. And of course, they don't count those in the deaths. Sure.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yes,
and incidentally, I'm not a medical person, but I think it's worthwhile pointing out that even they have erred a lot. They've changed their mind on masks several times. They told us it wouldn't be prevalent in hot weather. We're having an outbreak in Arizona. It's 110 degrees. So they've been wrong a lot.
Well, then they told us we didn't need masks, and then they said we do need masks. You know?
Right. So we've followed their advice, and it's, I think it's clearer what this does to the economy than it is to what it does to the spread of this disease.
That's a problem. Well, any parting thoughts, Neil, for our viewers this week? And of course, we're going to have you back on a regular basis, kind of giving the economic update, because it's hard to get what really is going on in the economy if you read the mainstream press, the mainstream liberal press. They don't have facts. They got a lot of opinions. They don't label them as opinions, but that's the way it goes. So we're going to have you back regularly to kind of enlighten us on what is really going on in the economy and its future, and any advice. And of course, there are no guarantees of anything you advise on. You're not giving investment advice. You're not a registered investment advisor, right? People should make their own decisions. Am I missing something?
We will only make general statements because you really cannot give advice unless you know the particular circumstances of an individual client.
Very good. Well, Neil Nobel, thank you so much for joining us on Tell It Like It Is. We'll see you next time. And we'll be back after these messages.
Houston's only Cadillac to your door dealer, Ron Carter Cadillac, delivers test drives to your home or office. For a limited time, get $16,000 off all in-stock Cadillac 2019 XT5 crossovers and $19,000 off all in-stock 2019 CT6 sedans. Or experience the first ever 2020 Cadillac XT6 Premium Luxury Collection, only $519 with $1 down for 39 months lease. Or purchase and receive 0.9% APR for 72 months with no payments until November. RonCarterCadillac.com.
When it comes to protecting yourself and your partners, all the information out there can be overwhelming. Visit our website. We are a free and confidential service striving to help you stay informed and stay notified. We are committed to a healthy Houston.
Houston's only Cadillac to your door dealer, Ron Carter Cadillac, delivers test drives to your home or office. Drive the new 2020 Cadillac XT4, only $399 a month, or the new 2020 XT5, only $429 a month, both for 39 months lease with just $1 down. Or purchase the XT4 or XT5 and enjoy 0.9% APR for 72 months with no payments until November. RonCarterCadillac.com.
Welcome back to Tell It Like It Is. In this segment, we have a fascinating guest, Ray Hunt. Ray is a leader in the Houston Police Officers Union and has been a leader, God, as long as I've known him, which I think is over 30 years. He's always been frank. He tells it like it is. And we need to have a frank talk today about the situation with the police. Ray, as a citizen, I'm concerned that the enemies of the police are trying to destroy the police and eliminate the thin blue line between peaceful and law-abiding citizens and the criminal element in America. Am I missing something?
No, you should be concerned, and everybody watching this should be concerned if they care about their house, if they care about their property, if they care about their safety when they go to the grocery store, to the bank, wherever it may be. They should be concerned because a very, very small segment of the population is getting all the attention right now and talking about defunding the police. Quite frankly, the Houston Police Department has kind of been defunded for the last 15 years because the city's results show that they're about 1,500 officers short. So if they want to continue down this path, and I can tell you that if you're an officer out there right now and you're eligible for retirement, and that's about 40%, those folks are on the fence right now.
40%?
40%. Those folks are on the fence right now saying, should I go? And a lot of them are going to say, absolutely, it's just not worth it.
Well, and like in New York, there's so many people that are retiring that you have to wait to get a schedule to get your paperwork in because they're filled for weeks.
Yeah, for a while there, they want to get rid of all the police, and the police all start retiring. And they say, whoa, we can't have this because their murders start skyrocketing there in New York. It's going to continue. Our murders are up here, murders are up in New York, murders are up in Chicago. Murders are going to continue to go up in Seattle, where you got some nutcase there as a mayor. These folks are going to destroy this country. I have no doubt about it.
Well,
it's a very small segment.
Well, but it's also that thin line that we talked about between public safety and anarchy. And what I'm trying to figure out is those who advocate defunding the police, for example, in New York, they cut $1 billion out of their budget. $1 billion. I look, but they have an answer. They said, okay, we're going to spend some money on social workers to deal with things like domestic violence and things like that. And I always knew from my years working as a lawyer that domestic violence calls are some of the most dangerous calls the police ever make.
Just had 2 McAllen police officers killed on a domestic violence call last night, ambushed.
Don't you think a social worker would make a difference?
Absolutely not. As soon as they walked up to the door, they didn't have time to get their weapons. They were ambushed and killed. But I'll tell you what, most people, because of mainstream media, will never know those 2 officers' names.
No.
We've had 29 officers killed by gunfire since January of this year, and I promise you, unless you're a relative of one of those 29, nobody out there knows who they are. Because the media just says, 2 more officers were killed today, let's go on to the next story. But you get police officers who make a split-second decision and take someone's life, and we are the villains. We're the most terrible people around, and everybody knows who that person is that a police officer shot. But we have 29 police officers shot, and no one out there knows their names.
Well, being a policeman, Ray, I've always thought was really dangerous. One of the things I've always advised my clients that I've talked to in encounters with the police, you need to respect the police officers. You need to understand their situation, especially in a one-car unit, which I've always opposed, as you know. I think we need 2 men units or 2 women units. But when the police come to you,
2-person units, we
2
call
people.
it now.
Okay,
2020, 2-person units.
Well, I'm a little old. 2-person units. But the concern, what I tell my clients is, look, it's night. There's not a lot of other people around. It may be an officer all by him or herself, and they're on being careful because of what you just said. The number of police officers getting shot and killed, it goes up every year. So they got to be careful. So, do smart things. Be respectful. Keep your hands on the wheel. Only do the things they instruct you to do. And if there's you got a righteous complaint, that you have a defense, you really didn't do anything, I didn't run that stop sign, whatever it is, you can deal with it later, as opposed to trying to deal with it then. But if you don't respect the police officers, then there's no hope.
The other side will say that the police officers aren't respecting them, therefore why should we respect the police officers? So we take it a different step. We say, all we're asking for you to do is comply and then complain. Comply with the officer's request. You don't have to say, thank you, sir, yes, sir, yes, sir, but just comply with their request. And if they did something wrong and you believe they did something wrong, at least here in Houston, they're all wearing a body camera, then go complain. Now, I know what people are going to say, yeah, Internal Affairs won't do anything about it. Anybody who says that has never been investigated by our Internal Affairs Division. If you're charged with something from Internal Affairs, even if they can't prove what the citizen complains you would do, they'll find something to get you on because they think that that's what they have to do in Internal Affairs. We have a lot of divisions in the Houston Police Department. All of them are understaffed except one, Internal Affairs Division. Fully staffed, every complaint gets investigated and gets investigated fully. Let me add one more thing. We have about 2 million citizen contacts a year at the Houston Police Department, about 2 million. We have less than 1,000 complaints that are filed, and guess what? 800 of those are filed by officers on officers. Only 200 and something complaints come from citizens. I know what the viewers are saying. That's because y'all don't do anything. We complain. We don't want to go down to the police station to complain. You can file a complaint with the NAACP, with LULAC, at any police station or our internal affairs. You don't have to come talk to a police officer. Go to LULAC. Go to the NAACP and let them take that complaint. We will investigate that. If they want the Texas Rangers to investigate it, we don't care. We don't care who's investigated so long as they don't have a political agenda. So if you talk about this Civilian Review Board with subpoena authority investigating this, absolutely not. Would you want them investigating the murder of your wife, your daughter, or anybody else? No, they're not competent to investigate. But you let the district attorney's office investigate it, who we don't like, but let them investigate it. They're trained investigators. Let the Texas Rangers, let the Justice Department, or let our folks. We don't care. We just want a fair shot with a fair investigator.
Well, 200 out of 2 million is infinitesimal. Was that a tenth of 1%?
Of course. Okay. But everybody thinks that, oh, yeah, the police officers are just out of control.
Well, what happens is, I think the statistics were last year, 14 African-American citizens were shot by the police. I'm not saying they were righteous shootings or unrighteous, but that's 14 out of all those encounters. The statistics actually show more white citizens were shot by the police than African-Americans, but regardless, it's interesting that the numbers are so low. So why is it? Why is it that the media continues to hammer away at the police on the isolated incidents that take place with a handful of bad police officers?
It sells advertising. It's the soup du jour. It's what everybody wants to talk about is a bad police officer. Thousands of calls every day go around, and a police officer is doing an outstanding job out there, whether they're buying somebody's groceries, whether they're changing a tire, whether they're getting a kid back home.
Delivering babies,
whatever they're doing.
Right.
But you let one police officer make a split-second incorrect decision, and let me tell you something, when they make that incorrect decision, frequently, over 700 times in the last several years, they go commit suicide. Police officers don't want to do that. Police officers aren't out here waking up saying, "Ooh, I hope I get involved in a shooting this morning." And if anybody viewing this believes that, they've never been a police officer. Ask somebody who you know. Everybody out there knows a police officer. And most of them are going to be a relative, and you'll say, yeah, but the rest of them aren't like my relative. My relative's a good guy. 95, 99% of police officers are doing an outstanding job. I was a police officer night shift for 18 years, never once fired my weapon, and I was on the streets nearly every weekend. Never once fired my weapon, thank God. How many people could I have killed? Multiple times I'd have been justified. But thank God that I made the right decision and hesitated. But there's other officers, some of the 115 that's been killed in the line of duty that hesitated, and they're not with us today. So a split-second decision. Thank God for the Supreme Court, Graham versus Connor, that says that you will not have 20/20 hindsight judge it, but the officer on the scene will.
Well, it's unfair.
Of course it's unfair.
And what I find interesting, I don't think there's an understanding among the major media and the coverage they've given of how a policeman has to deal with these situations. There was some examples, African-American officers in New York with these so-called nonviolent protesters screaming obscenities in their face and spitting on it. I mean, just horrible. Has that impacted recruitment of minority officers for
Not
y'all?
just recruitment, but morale is at the lowest I've seen it in 31 years at the Houston Police
Depressing.
Department. And this, think about this for a second. This is low morale at a department who has a mayor that supports the police, who council just unanimously passed an increased budget, filled our academy class, allows us to have academy classes if we can possibly find the candidates in this environment. And we're feeling this way. Think about the folks in Seattle. Think about the folks in Chicago. Think about the folks in New York who got horrible mayors that don't support the police. Minneapolis. Example. Think about those folks. If we have low morale with a supportive mayor and supportive council, how do you think they feel?
Well,
I'd jump away from there as fast as I could and get
well,
out
and
of
that's
that
why I
place.
think we have record Los Angeles, another example, and the politicians just beating on the police and blaming the police.
You are telling police officers, we don't want you to do any proactive policing.
Or we don't value you.
No, we don't value. And look, we at the HPLU have taken a new position for this coming session. We're going to acknowledge that we're part of the executive branch. We enforce the laws. You tell us, people, what you want us to enforce. If you don't want us responding to the apartment complex who they say, hey, somebody's smoking marijuana next door to me, just tell us and we won't go there. We don't want to encounter those folks, but it's our job. Just tell us, I don't want you responding to those kind of calls. If it's civil in nature, somebody, not the kids aren't the custody issue where the father's not dropping the kids off on time, just tell us if you don't want us to go there anymore. We won't go anymore. If there's a HOA out there that says we don't want any proactive policing in our neighborhood, just tell us. We won't go.
You're not going to like what happens.
We don't want to be anywhere where we're not wanted, because when we do that, all it has the potential of somebody getting hurt, and we don't want to do that. So just tell us what you want. I can tell you, any neighborhood that says that, their crime is going to skyrocket. Don't believe it? Let's just see what happens the first place that defunds the police. I kind of hope that Minneapolis does completely get rid of their police
Because
department.
we get an example.
Let us have a test case that's 1,200 miles away instead of right here in the city of Houston. But you're not going to have that with this mayor.
All right, we're coming up on a commercial break, Ray, and then we'll be back with another segment. But I want to throw something else out to you. There's a lawsuit going on in federal court, and the activists are asking one of our federal judges to empty the county jail because there's a COVID epidemic in there. Though looking at the statistics, I don't think that's true. I think it's just hype. But they want to get everybody out of the jail. And there's like 7,000 people left, and they've been described to me as violent criminals.
Well, you got to make room for the police officers that are making wrong split-second decisions and the businesses that are open up in violation of Lena Hidalgo's order. So what are you going to do? You got to dump the bad guys out in order to make room for the other folks. It's so outrageous that this is where we are in this country and this county that it just makes me sick. I can leave anytime I want to from the Houston Police Department.
You're eligible. You're eligible.
I've sat there in the driveway and said, do I go to work or do I go to the pension office?
Yeah.
I'm going to keep fighting as long as I can, but it's very difficult when you've got county leaders. County leaders aren't like the city. When you got 3 county leaders that do not like the police, and I'm convinced of that, and one of them used to be a police officer.
Which one would that be? The sheriff. The old
Well,
sheriff.
former Adrian Garcia.
He didn't like.
Well, he's voting with Hidalgo and Ellis on everything that's anti-police. So
Ellis is ready to take County Commissioner Ellis, who's looks like ready to take a meat axe to law enforcement in the county.
Is he the county commissioner or is he the county judge? Because it seems like he's running everything.
I think he's running it. I think he
Sure
has
seems
two.
like
I think
it.
he has 3 votes in his pocket every time.
I agree.
He now wants to declare that racism is a public health emergency. That's one of the biggest problems we face. I thought COVID was the public health emergency, but I could be wrong.
Well, we're proud to have a majority-minority police department, and that happened because of the Houston Police Officers Union allowing the city to hire whoever they want to put in the academy. We don't give the civil service exam like other civil service cities do. So we do have a majority-minority department, and we're proud of that. We want our department to reflect what the community looks like, but those on the other side, they don't want a police department like that. They want no police department. And when I say the others, it's that 5%, the Antifa, the folks that don't want any government, the anarchists. Those folks are the ones that they have a toehold right now, and they want to continue to push it, and they're hoping that other folks will follow suit.
Well,
and I'm hoping that people don't listen to that small percentage, but they listen to the majority of all races that support the police.
Well, and that's the group that nobody seems to ever talk to.
Of course not. They're not going to talk to those folks. And a lot of the good folks don't want to say anything because they don't want the Antifa and the folks out in front of their house protesting at 3 o'clock in the morning.
Oh, which they do.
Of course. We had a council member tell us that she was going to vote no on something for helmets for police officers because she didn't want the protesters back in front of her house at 3 a.m. Seriously.
So our First Amendment freedoms are being threatened by these anarchists.
Who could possibly vote against a police officer having a helmet for those riots? Who could possibly? These aren't offensive helmets. We're not using them to ram you. These are helmets to make sure that when some coward throws a brick from the back of the crowd and it hits you in the head, that you're able to go home safely. That's all we're asking for.
That's not asking too much.
It's not asking too much.
Yeah, and when we get back, we're going to take this break. I want to talk about were the protests in Houston really peaceful. We'll be back with Tell It Like It Is with Ray Hunt after these messages.
Houston's only Cadillac to your door dealer, Ron Carter Cadillac, delivers test drives to your home or office. For a limited time, get $16,000 off all in-stock Cadillac 2019 XT5 crossovers and $19,000 off all in-stock 2019 CT6 sedans. Or experience the first ever 2020 Cadillac XT6 Premium Luxury Collection, only $519 with $1 down for 39 months lease. Or purchase and receive 0.9% APR for 72 months with no payments until November. RonCarterCadillac.com.
When it comes to protecting yourself and your partners, all the information out there can be overwhelming. Visit our website. We are a free and confidential service striving to help you stay informed and stay notified. We are committed to a healthy Houston.
Houston's only Cadillac to your door dealer, Ron Carter Cadillac, delivers test drives to your home or office. Drive the new 2020 Cadillac XT4, only $399 a month, or the new 2020 XT5, only $429 a month, both for 39 months lease with just $1 down. Or purchase the XT4 or XT5 and enjoy 0.9% APR for 72 months with no payments until November. RonCarterCadillac.com.
Welcome back to Tell It Like It Is. Our guest is Ray Hunt, leader in the Houston Police Officers Union, and a dear friend. We don't always agree on everything, but we respect each other's opinion. So Ray, we were talking off camera about the couple in St. Louis. This is a left-wing lawyer, okay, who lives in a gated community whose front gate was broken down by these so-called peaceful protesters, and tell the rest of the story and where we're at today.
Well, we obviously, one of them had a long gun, and one of them had a pistol out there just protecting their property, making sure that none of these protesters came onto their property. And by the way, the protesters were saying all kinds of vulgar things like raping their child and which room they were going to take.
They're going to kill their dog, too.
Yeah, which room they were going to take when they went into the house and these kind of things. And at the same time that their prosecutor in that county is not accepting charges from police officers who are bringing in bad guys, they run a warrant the other evening and go into that house and take that person's weapons. I can tell you this, I believe it's an unlawful order. I don't believe you can do it. And I know that if I had been told that you're going to run that warrant, I would have refused. The chief could have fired me. I believe I would have gotten my job back because I believe that is a completely unlawful order. I will say this to any people who are watching out there. I would not do the same thing they did. They're not police officers, so they weren't sure exactly how to do it. I would have remained inside my house where no protester could see me, and that gun would have been trained right at the front door. And if anybody came in, that's whenever I would have said, if you come in, I'm going to use deadly force. I wouldn't have stood out there because it does sometimes agitate an agitator to see somebody out there trying to exercise their constitutional right. So I probably would have done it differently, but it's not a criminal offense what they did. And this district attorney in that county ought to be ashamed of herself or himself for doing what they did.
Yeah, they ought to remove her.
Absolutely they should, but they're not going to because that's, like I say, it's what's going on now in this climate.
In Texas, we have something called the Castle Doctrine. So that's what you were talking about.
Yes, I'm telling you that I would not do anything to antagonize a nutcase. And these folks who are going out here breaking down gates and going in front of people's houses at 3 or 4 in the morning, they're nutcases. I'm convinced of that. I wouldn't do that. I would simply remain in my home with my protection. But I encourage everybody out there who's comfortable to have a firearm in your residence. Just make sure that you keep it safe, especially if you've got small children around.
And they need to get training.
Absolutely, you should be trained. No doubt about it. Training is the key. Every single officer has to be trained for several weeks before they're able to carry a firearm, and we would encourage the same for your viewers.
All right, I was looking at statistics in preparation for visiting with you, Ray, and I found in the Pew Research polls last week, 73% of the Americans support maintaining or increasing funding for the police.
That surprised me.
And 75% of black citizens are either very or somewhat satisfied by the police performance in the U.S.
Doesn't surprise me.
So why is it we don't seem to ever hear that from our friends in the national media?
No, you're
or the Houston Chronicle, our local paper.
Because those folks aren't standing on corners, throwing things at police officers, spitting on police officers. That kind of video sells. The media loves that. The media was out there during our protest here in Houston. They weren't showing the peaceful folks. They were showing the other folks who were doing things because they want people to see that. But they weren't showing the police officers who were getting injured. We had one officer, I have a picture on my phone, he was hit in the head, he doesn't know with a bottle or a brick or what, multiple stitches in there, blood all over his face. Yes, the majority of people there were peacefully protesting, but there was that 5% that I keep talking about that were the anarchists, the anti-government, the people who police officers call turds, who were out there throwing things at officers, spitting at officers, blowing smoke under the officers who had shields on their face. Our officers, especially the young ones that were on those skirmish lines, did an incredible job keeping this city safe. And I'll tell you this, our leader, Chief Slinkert and Chief Finner, who were on those lines with the officers, our executive assistant chiefs, did a phenomenal job to keep this city from burning down during those protests. Not from the peaceful folks. When they left there, we were at our building, which was very close to the location. Many of those folks walking by, how y'all doing, waving at us, going and getting their cars and leaving, because all they were doing was protesting what happened to George Floyd, which was tragic. Every police officer I know said the same thing, but they were saying, "Hi, officer, thank you," walking away. It was that 5% that stuck around, who have no jobs, who have nothing else to do, who want to just sit there and be agitators. I'm not talking about blacks. I'm talking about blacks, whites, Hispanics, that 5% of every group that hates the police and hates government.
Well, they hate America, too.
Of course they do.
And so the true story of what happened in Houston, because the local media coverage would have you believe, at least I thought it was peaceful protest. The Chronicle never said a word about assaulting police officers, looting, etc. So I guess they missed part of the story, didn't they?
They did miss part of the story, but it's par for the course for the Chronicle. I don't even call that a real paper. The Chronicle is so far left and aren't going to do anything that's going to disrupt the narrative that they have out there that the police are the problem and not the 5%.
Unbelievable.
It is
Did we have, to your knowledge, did we have outside agitators who came to Houston to raise
We didn't
hell?
show any results of any arrests that people from the outside were coming in. And let me tell you that this city has done a phenomenal job in staying safe and not doing what some other cities are doing. And anybody can say it. I know that you're not a big fan of Mayor Sylvester Turner, but Mayor Sylvester Turner made it very clear that people were not going to burn buildings down. They weren't going to burn police cars. They weren't going to harm our officers. If they were, we were going to take action. And that's exactly what we did.
And was that the rules of engagement you all were given?
Well, I don't want to go with all the rules of engagement we were given, but I'll tell you this.
Freedom.
They were followed, and we let the peaceful protesters peacefully protest, and the people who were not doing it peacefully, we made sure that was going to happen, and we made sure that no police station was taken.
And to be fair, I mean, I have a lot of issues with how Turner operates the city, but one area which I think he's done a good job is work with the police in trying to get the police department to be at the level of manpower we need so the city can be safe. And he stood behind the police during all the protests.
I'm a lifelong Republican, and I will never ever say anything negative about.
So I said I can say nice things too about him. I give him credit.
Gary, not only did he pass the budget that increased it, he passed it while I was sitting in there, and you could hear that 5% out there hollering to defund the police.
Right.
From
that showed political courage.
It did.
Good for him.
Every single council member voted for that budget.
Yeah, well, all of them showed political courage.
They did. I'm very proud of our city council.
You go all
members.
around the country, there's not a lot of courage left. So
No.
in that respect, for a liberal mayor, Turner gets credit.
And that's why I say, for us to have the lowest morale we've ever seen, and we have the support of council and the mayor, I just can't imagine Seattle, Chicago, New York.
It's because of the abuse.
Minneapolis.
It's because of the abuse.
Yeah,
I think what it is.
True.
So, what's the future?
It's very bleak. Thanks
for that uplifting message.
I hate to say it, but I am very concerned about the community that my 8-year-old granddaughter, my 6-year-old granddaughter, and my 2 1.5-year-old twin granddaughters are going to be growing up in. Because if this takes a hold of defunding the police, and when you need help and you pick up the phone, you can't dial 911 and have folks show up there within minutes that are going to make sure that you're safe, we are in serious trouble.
Well, I think we're headed to the Wild West.
Well, like I say, you've got a number of people who are buying guns is off the chart.
You can't get guns.
Get a gun. No,
there's a waiting list.
AR-15s, ammunition, small guns, long guns. You can't get them right now because everybody's scared to death that the police are not going to be able to show up anymore because they're going to have some liberal police chief or liberal mayor that's going to tell you to stand down, and thankfully we don't have that.
Well, like happened in Seattle.
Absolutely.
Or Minneapolis.
Yep.
I mean, think about this. Minneapolis, the mayor let the mob burn down a police station.
You can
can't
hear
make
our
this stuff.
executive chief, and I can't say it on the air because there's a profane word in there, but you can hear it when they say there's a group heading toward 1200 Travis, which is our police headquarters, and he said all available units to 1200 Travis, do not let those people take that building. And we would not let that happen in Houston.
That wasn't going to happen.
It was not going to happen in Houston.
And to the credit of the mayor, as you said, the rules of engagement you were given allowed you to do your job.
Yeah,
So that,
and
again,
we,
I give
we
him
put
credit.
out no tear gas. If anybody says we use tear gas, not true. We didn't use dogs. We didn't use fire hoses. Any of that's fake news. Didn't happen. We did use some pepper spray at one point when persons were trying to take over a city bus, and it worked. We were able to get them off the bus quickly, but all the other stuff is fake news.
No, I did hear from sources that there were brick caches left in different parts of downtown. Is that true?
Well, there's a lot of construction going on downtown, so I don't want to be the fake news on the other side.
Okay.
But persons were picking. I don't believe that the 5% are smart enough to go stash stuff anywhere. They're going to take whatever's available there and throw
Okay.
rocks. But there was a cell phone store that was ransacked and looted. There was a few windows that were broken. There were a lot of people who painted stuff downtown. There was a black gentleman, an older black guy that we found down there nearly every night after the protest, who was out there cleaning off their graffiti himself.
You know what I found interesting, though, when I went downtown, this is the first week or so, I found that the county administration building in the criminal courthouse was boarded up with plywood.
I didn't hear anything from Lena Hidalgo the whole time this was going on.
That tells you someone who was out there supporting whatever the crazies wanted to do was afraid.
She
of
was
the
nowhere to be
mob.
found.
You couldn't find her anywhere.
No.
Too busy trying to get the people out of the
And I'm
county
sure Rodney
jail.
was in his gated community or his gated home and didn't have to worry about it either.
It's unbelievable.
It's very sad.
And they get away with it because nobody calls them on it, or the media doesn't cover it.
I think Lena Hidalgo's days are numbered, and I think she knows that as soon as this election's over with, as soon as the next time.
Well,
it
yeah,
comes up for her,
and if
she's
you
done.
slide into politics, she was an accidentally elected. Nobody even knew when they voted straight Democratic because they liked Beto O'Rourke for God knows whatever reason. They were going to elect people that were unqualified, and this is not just her. I mean, and I want to say this: we work in the courthouse. There's a number of terrific Democratic judges.
There's a lot of terrific Democrats, no
that
doubt
are
about
really
it. She's not one of
smart-
them.
No, that are smart and do their job with distinction and grace. And then we have the others who got elected who don't know anything, should have never even run. I mean, the kind of thing is you don't even run for an office you're not qualified for. Lena Hidalgo, not qualified. A number of Democrats who ran for judge, not qualified, never even should have thought about running. But they get elected in the sweep, the last straight ticket vote they could have. We lost a lot of good Republican judges, a handful of Republicans that we could do without. But most of them had done really good work. And losing County Judge Emmett was a big deal. And
It was. It was
He-
a huge deal.
he just, it's a tough situation.
I hope we look at the finances when she took over and when she leaves office, and you're going to see just an incredible difference. I
The
promise you.
well, the rainy day fund is essentially gone.
Yeah, of course. Well, you can't continue to pump up your defense, what do you call it, public defender's office, and continue to just throw money at them and just think that you're going to be
Well, the
able to continue to
goal,
function.
Rodney Ellis's goal when you talk about that, and there's some good people who work for the public defender's office to be sure, but Ellis's goal is to have everybody working for the government. That or just being on the dole, because the Democratic Party, in my belief, understands that the more people dependent on government, then they got a built-in class that's going to vote for them all the time. But the problem is there's not going to be any money because businesses are going to flee Harris County. We're going to be like Wayne County, Detroit, and people are going to leave, businesses are going to leave, and we'll be stuck with what we're going to end up with.
If a business does not think that they can close up at night and come back the next morning and open their doors and don't have 5 glasses broken or all their stuff looted, they're not going to stay here.
No.
And I don't blame them. If they continue to do what they're doing, and we continue to not be able to recruit police officers, recruiting is down 64% nationwide on police officers.
How about here?
Who in the hell? We don't know yet. We've got the 5 classes available. Let's see if we're going to be able to fill them. Who in the hell would want to be a police officer right now?
Yeah, it makes it really tough. So, which city do you want to see experiment with getting rid of the police and going to social workers?
Well, I think the best one is Minneapolis.
Yeah,
They're
they
the
should
ones that
just
are
go.
already on target for it. They're the ones where the nutcase set for 8 minutes and 46 seconds on Mr. Floyd's neck. And that stuff is tragic. It's incredibly tragic. I'll tell you this, just as tragic, 11 police officers have been shot and killed in the United States since George Floyd was shot. 11 have been shot. I promise you, nobody knows their names. Nobody out there knows their names.
Well, those names need to be out there. We'll be happy to cover that.
Say their
and
name.
Talk about these
Say
people
their name.
and thank them and their family for their sacrifice, because it's significant.
These people got small kids. These two down in McAllen, they have children. They have families. One of them's been on just a couple of years, shot and killed, ambushed by some nutcase on a family disturbance that some people want to send untrained social workers or gun social workers to those locations.
No, they'll be killed faster.
And we're not opposed to, if they want to do any experiments, they can do it.
You're happy to do that.
Well, we don't want anybody to get in danger,
No.
but if a social worker believes that they can do our job better than we can,
Go for it.
let's send them to those nonviolent calls.
Give them
because
a
a
chance.
nonviolent call quickly turns violent. It's like Lynn Hidalgo talks about burglary of a motor vehicle, that it's a nonviolent crime. It is a nonviolent crime until the homeowner comes out and finds you in their car. And then it becomes violent because somebody's going to shoot somebody or stab somebody.
Well, you're right. Or you could end up have a gun pulled on you as you come out. Well, that goes back to the theory of broken window theory of policing, which Ray, I think is really important, isn't it? That you allow abuse, you let little things happen, and then people get the word and it builds up.
Let me tell you something. Criminals know that you don't commit a burglary of a motor vehicle in Montgomery County. We've stopped criminals, we've stopped gang members who've got a map of Harris County. I'm not exaggerating, a map outlined of Harris County to know you don't go into Montgomery County and commit one of these offenses because Brett Ligon's going to put your ass in jail. You stay right here where they know Kim Ollie's going to give you a PR bond and let you out for free. That's the truth. Everybody knows about Harris County. So if you live in Harris County, you better tell your leaders that we want you to start enforcing the laws. If you don't, nobody's going to want to stay in Harris County.
And your point that if they don't like the laws, they go to the legislature and change them.
Change them.
Get rid of them.
Yes.
Make it not a crime.
Yep.
Well, Ray, thank you so much for being on. As always, you're fascinating, interesting, and we will have you back talking about state of police. I'm hopeful. I'm actually pretty pessimistic like you are, but I'm optimistic that maybe the vast majority of the American people are going to wake up and say, this is not what we want.
Thank you, Gary. And I tell you, we want to work with any church group out there, any civic group. If they want to contact us, we'll be glad to come out there and do a town hall, do any type of dialogue back and forth to see how we can work better together.
One thought, and I know you go to the high schools too, don't you? You talk to the students.
That's where we do the comply and complain.
They need to hear mutual respect.
Yep. And sometimes a police officer who's very nervous does not come across as respectful to you. We understand that. But just remember what I said. Comply, then complain, and we all go home alive.
Well, that's the goal.
The citizen and us.
I like that.
Yep.
Well, thanks for watching. We'll be back next week at the same time and same place. You can email the show at GaryPolland@AmericanStarTV.com. You can get my bi-weekly newsletter, the Texas Conservative Review, by signing up for free at TexasConservativeReview.com. Remember, in the immortal words of President Ronald Reagan, you and I have a rendezvous with destiny. Will we preserve for our children this, the last best hope for man on earth, or we will sentence them to 1,000 years of a new dark age? I'll see you next week.